Peace needs more. Statements do not dissuade Israel. Actions do. And the danger right now is that because the Trump administration took US policy to an extreme, literally, they did not leave one sacred stone of the Palestinian issue, legitimate cause, untouched. Not one stone. Jerusalem, refugees, borders, settlements, annexation, name it. They even removed the designation of occupied territories from the State Department. They did not leave one issue untouched. As you know, they shuttered our mission in Washington. When I was the ambassador in the US, they shuttered the Consulate General, the US Consulate General in Jerusalem, they defunded UNRWA, etc. To such an extreme, even a return to the situation before Trump now might seem like progress. But I'm sure you remember, my friends, and this is very important for all of us to remind ourselves. The situation before Trump was not a positive one. There was no meaningful peace process. Israel was expanding its settlements still. We were moving, albeit at a slower pace, away from a two-state solution outcome, not towards one. And Israel was then and is still building an entire infrastructure of roads and walls to bypass areas of Palestinian population density, as you know, to ensure that the settlers who live illegally in these occupied territory can continue to do so without any inconvenience. As we speak, mega high roads, motorways are being built deep in the West Bank to connect them with major Israeli cities. So the settler who live in Nablus or in Khalil, Hebron, or in Jerusalem or anywhere can reach Tel Aviv or any other city in matters of minutes. The Trump plan may have gone with the Trump administration. It may have gone with the Trump administration, but the Trump plan was always an Israeli plan. And Israel continues to follow its blueprint from so many years ago, and it will continue. That blueprint was laid long ago. And in order to stop its implementation, we simply cannot go back in time, my friends. We must go forward. We must change an old approach that did not work. It simply did not work. This starts with recognizing the reality on the ground. That reality is stark. The land for a Palestinian state is disappearing. We cannot hide our heads under the sand. It is disappearing under our feet, even as Israel is making living conditions harder and harder for Palestinian people in the occupied territories. In addition to the expansion of settlements, house demolitions, land confiscation abound, whole communities are displaced. Gaza, where I was born, proudly, remains under an inhumane siege that has now gone on for nearly 15 years. And settlers, meanwhile, are running amok. Over the past month only, according to the Israeli Yesh Din human rights organizations, there have been nearly 50 confirmed cases of settler violence against Palestinian civilians, including children. One of these was 11 years old Hala, who was playing outside her family's home in Nablus last week, when a group from the notorious Yitzhar settlement descended on her village, on her area, and pelted her home and the girl with stones. Hala was taken to hospital after being hit in the face and head by stones. No one was arrested. Indeed, more than 80% of cases of settler violence against Palestinians are never even investigated. Less than 4% result in indictment. Even though settlers live illegally in occupied territory, they are subject to Israeli law, unlike us, the Palestinian people in the same area, who are subjected to Israeli military law. And this is not the only glaring example of the discrimination and the racism that the reality entails back home. We will have, and you, all of us, will have read the glowing reports of Israel's vaccination program. You may, of course, also know that this program, glowing it is, and Israel was, number one in the world, and it still is. While including settlers living illegally in the West Bank, excludes the Palestinian people in the same area, or indeed in Gaza. This is unconscionable. It is wrong, and it is illegal. It is illegal. And let me be very clear, Israel has the responsibility for the welfare of the people under its military occupation. not just under international law, by the way, but under the interim agreement signed with the PLO in 1995. Under the interim agreement we signed with Israel in 1995. By the way, that agreement was meant to produce a Palestinian sovereign independent state by 1999. And then we would have been able to vaccinate our people. We would have our airports and seaports and our access, and we are capable to do so. But because of what I described earlier in terms of the attempts to hijack and to block the two-state solution, we never reached that conclusion. But even in the interim agreement, both specifically mentions, I mean international law and the agreements, that issues of pandemics is an area of particular concern, and that the Israeli government is responsible in the meantime, in the interim arrangement, until we reach a final status issue. That the Israeli government is vaccinating just Israelis is another sign of the kind of discrimination, the kind of mindset, the kind of ideology that is endemic to Israel's system. This is the kind of discrimination that has led Israel's most important recognized human rights organization, B'Tselem, to declare that the country is an apartheid regime only 2 weeks ago. In a very extended full report, I invite you to read it. And that is the reality on the ground. And it demands action, my friends, real and substantive action. We are playing our part as Palestinians. We are taking action every day in the West Bank, including today, every day in Gaza. People are taking off to the streets, defending their rights, defending their lands, defending their homes with their bare bodies. And earlier this month, President Mahmoud Abbas issued a presidential decree announcing dates for new national elections for the parliament, the president, the PNC. We acknowledge that these are long overdue. It is time for all Palestinians, all political factions, to renew our political legitimacy vis-a-vis the Palestinian people. It is the people of Palestine that decides the leadership and the political system. The PLO, meanwhile, continues to remain committed to non-violent resistance and international law. We continue to be religiously committed to non-violence and international law. We reserve the right to engage in such resistance and in accordance with international law, however. That can include all available peaceful resistance, including demonstrations, and taking our grievances to international fora in order that Israel be held accountable under law. It is legitimate that we go to the International Criminal Court, the ICC, and you've seen the attempts to block us, not only by the US, by the way, and I don't want to go much further. It is hypocrisy by key international players and key Western countries to try and block us from using international fora, international mechanisms to bring accountability to this unbearable situation. And thirdly, on the diplomatic front, we must strengthen, my friends, the bonds with our allies, our friends everywhere, starting from you, and offer our mutual work, our support where we can. And I am hopeful in this respect. I am truly, truly hopeful. Most hopeful is in this respect. It's about you. I see positive developments everywhere, in the UK and in the United States, where a growing Palestinian community, by the way, is finding its voice in the US, in the White House, in the State Department, in the Congress, in the Senates of the various states, and where rights-based grassroots movements that have sprung up in the past few years, from progressive Jewish organizations to Black Lives Matter, to Latino groups, including, of course, they all include the Palestinian cause as an integral part of their agenda. This is very hopeful. This is extremely inspiring. We want to renew our relationship with America and with all those freedom-loving people everywhere. We need to do so on a fundamentally different footing than before. When our bilateral relations were fundamentally, we're always, how can I say it? Our bilateral relationship with the US, we're always hostage to a highly unusual degree to the US Congress, in which Israel enjoys, as you know, great favor. We also want to impress upon Washington that it is needed right now to recast its relationship to our cause and to the peacemaking. This is the moment to reset. Because on one point, Trump was right. The peace process was broken before he took office. And then in large part, it was broken because the US played the role of a sole mediator. That route has been tried. It led us down a dead end, my friends. And this is why President Abbas, our leadership, our people, for many years now, has called for an international mechanism to reach a fair and just resolution based on international law, international legality, international resolutions, international legitimacy, and backed by the rest of the world, including, of course, the United Kingdom. But the peace process and the mediation should never be confined to one country, one party. There is growing international support for such an international conference, and we hope the UK too will throw its considerable weight behind it. And my friends, the UK has an important role to play, a very, very crucial, important role to play. And all of you here have an important role to play. And I may argue it might be the most important role to play at this particular moment in our history. The UK and Europe could and should act as guarantors of international order that was wrought out of bitter European experience. It was created because of what happened in Europe in the 40s and the Second World War. And the global rules-based order that was forged in the ruins of the World War II, however, will descend into meaninglessness if this is not applied to all equally. And this is the point. And the UK government and the UK opposition are united behind international law. That is commendable as the framework for how we might reach resolution to the Palestinian issue. The PLO is fully signed up to this vision, to your vision. The Palestinian people, the state of Palestine, our leadership are signed up to this vision of two independent and sovereign states on the 1967 boundaries in which all citizens enjoy full equality, and with East Jerusalem as the capital of the state of Palestine. There must be a just and fair resolution to the issue of Palestinian refugees that includes a commitment to our, because I am one of the refugees, I was born in a refugee camp, to our internationally sanctioned rights, including the right of return. We are not a burden. We are not just a minor issue. No, we are 6 million people. We are more than half of the Palestinian people. And our issue must be addressed, and it could be. And there are international standards to address it. The whole world largely agrees with this outcome. And yet Israel has for decades ignored the global consensus. It has been allowed to. Put it simply, it has been allowed to. It has never been held to account. And this must stop. It's simple. It's straightforward. It has never been held to account. What neither the UK government nor opposition in the UK have yet done is taken the necessary and logical steps to convince Israel that it too must abide by the law, that Israel is not above the law, that no one is immune from the international rules that we have created together after the horrors of the Second World War. Chiefly among them is the inadmissibility of acquiring land by force, annexation. It is clear that only substantive, real, tangible pressure will make Israel pay attention, serious attention. And there are two substantive moves the UK could take immediately that you, our friends in the Labour Friends of Palestine, must help us advocate all through the UK cross-party. First, there needs to be a UK ban on all illegal settlement products, along with sanctions on companies that would profit from working on these stolen land. Simple and clear. Only today, just today, JCP, the British company, and its equipment was used by the Israeli military when it demolished buildings in a Palestinian community in the occupied Jordan Valley. Wadi al-Ahmar, not Khan al-Ahmar, just to Wadi al-Ahmar. Only today, a British company provides the Israeli military authorities equipment to destroy communities, buildings, structures. I think you will agree with me that British companies ought not play a part in such transgressions of international law and human rights violations. And you may have followed the UN. The UN was very clear. The UN Human Rights Council issued a database of 100 companies that must stop immediately working in these illegal settlements, including the JCP. Labour can lead the way here. Indeed, it is clear that Labour Party members as a whole are in favor of such a ban. Complete ban. We know that the Labour leadership last year suggested that a ban on settlement products would come into force should Israel move forward with plans for unilateral annexations of occupied territory. We find that position puzzling, Julie, if I may say. How does it discourage Israel from expanding settlements? Isn't it that what we should focus on? I mean, after all, what are settlements, if not a form of de facto annexation? Settlements is annexation. Is annexation. So what are we saying when we say we will ban settlement products if annexation happens? Also, did Israel not already unilaterally annex areas like occupied East Jerusalem? They did annex it. And they are building by the day illegal settlement units there in Jerusalem. Even if you want to stick to this policy, ought it not already be triggered? It is triggered. So either way, it is clear that Israel will not respond to anything other than substantive pressure. We believe that a ban on the illegal settlement products would provide such a substantive pressure and could actually make a real difference. And second, my friends, as Parliament voted for in 2014, there should be official UK recognition of the State of Palestine on the 1967 boundaries. I mean, the UK recognized the two-state solution, sponsored the two-state solution for decades. And this is time to recognize the two states. Why do you recognize one state and then leave that one state untamed, without borders, encroaching on the other state? It doesn't make sense. And the whole argument that recognition will have to come after a final status agreement also doesn't make sense. But then why did you recognize one state and the two states? So either you recognize the two states as an entry to the peace process, so you level the field and you give two an equal hearing, two states negotiating with each other on clear international grounds and framework, or you de-recognize both. Of course, we call for the recognition, because the recognition of the State of Palestine will definitely help. And again, the Labour Party can lead the way. You do lead the way. We know that the party members solidly support Palestinian statehood recognition immediately, as was manifested in the 2018 conference of the Labour Conference and the clear manifesto that calls for the immediate recognition of the State of Palestine. After all, Labour MPs led the way in the 2014. I see my good friend Richard Burden here, and I know how much Richard and all of his colleagues have worked tirelessly for achieving that historic moment of the UK Parliament representing the United Kingdom people. The people of the United Kingdom voted overwhelmingly to recognize the State of Palestine. Now, nearly 3/4 of the world's countries have recognized Palestine. As you know, I mean, almost 140 countries, including European countries. Recently, Sweden, the Vatican, and the Pope, with all the symbolism of that. But UK recognition would prove truly groundbreaking. It would set a precedent for others. It would be a domino that the UK wants, we want, everybody wants, to bring life back to a dying peace process. And no one can ignore a UK recognition. The UK has the international stature and the historical responsibility to take this decision and be confident that it would have a major positive reverberations everywhere. And my friends, let us not be distracted, please. The dire situation on the ground for the Palestinian people has led some to question whether a two-state solution, a two-state outcome is even possible anymore. I hear it. Many people are discussing the possibilities and the alternatives. This cannot be the priority at this moment. It cannot be. It's a luxury. The priority is to stop the Greater Israel project. The priority is definitely to put an end to what we are seeing right in front of our eyes, which will, by the way, the Greater Israel Project will certainly see will certainly see an end to this possibility. If the Greater Israel Project continues, there will not be a two-state solution. You know what? There will not be any other possibility. So please, spending our precious time discussing one state or two state misses the key point of trying to stop the monster that we are seeing unfolding in the occupied territories. Now, I know how difficult it can sometimes be for progressives like you around the world to advocate for our rights, for the Palestinian rights. I know. We know. We've been following the last few years. We know the attacks. We know the blackmail. We know the character assassinations, the naming. We know all that. So let us also not be distracted by attempts at misdirection. We need every effort and we need every energy. And let me give you one example, my friends. Next month, there will be a webinar which will include members of the British Parliament to discuss incitement in Palestinian Authority schools, textbooks, curriculum. Put aside for a moment that the Palestinian curriculum has been thoroughly vetted, was developed by experts based on international standards, and is subjected to constant internal review and external. Put aside for a moment that one of the organizations leading this smear campaign is the Institute for Monitoring Peace and Cultural Tolerance in School Education, Impact SE, a body connected to the Israeli extreme far-right fanatics, from its origins, by the way, in the 90s through to today, and whose current chairperson is a proud West Bank settler. Put that aside. And put also aside for a moment that just 2 days ago, the Israeli Prime Minister, Netanyahu himself, tweeted a video that included a map of historic Palestine, all of it designated as Israel, which is, by the way, one of the very examples used against the Palestinian textbooks as an example of incitement. Put all that aside, and let's ask ourselves this. Do you really think children living under a hostile military occupation whose only experience of Israelis is as soldiers, manning checkpoints, humiliating their parents, arresting their siblings, shooting their friends, closing their schools, taking their land, demolishing their homes, and yet remaining impervious to any law? Do you really think these children need a textbook to learn to loathe such behavior? No, they don't. I myself was educated long before the peace process brought in the Palestinian Authority and our own curriculum, long before that. Israel retained full control at the time over all aspects of our lives, and the only curriculum I could have studied at the time, and I did, in Gaza, was the Egyptian curriculum. I never saw mention of Palestine in that textbook. Not once Palestine is mentioned, as if it doesn't exist. I never saw mention of the PLO or our national movement, our national rights. I never even saw a mention of Mahmoud Darwish as national poet, nor did anyone of my generation saw any of this sort. Yet, my friends, we are the generation that started the first Intifada. Why? Because these are the lessons the occupation teaches us every single day on the streets. There is only one source of incitement, and that is Israel's illegal, belligerent, and immoral occupation of Palestinian land and people. And dear brothers and sisters, do not be distracted. All this incitement in textbook, and the list goes on, is distraction, diversion, war of attrition, put us on the defense rather than rightly on the offense against all these atrocities. And there is simply too much work to do and too little time in which to do it. But I remain optimistic, my friends. I really do. I know it gets hard sometimes, but I do remain optimistic. I look forward to my meeting with Sir Keir next month, where we will discuss some of these issues. The head of Labour and the Labour leadership. The Labour Party and the Palestinian cause has a long history together, based on shared values of equality for all, justice under law, and the rights of oppressed people to freedom and lives of dignity. I know this is the DNA of labor, and I can count on it, of the base of labor. We can bank on it and count on it and rely on it heavily. And I know Sir Keir shares with me these values. I look forward to hearing from him and the leadership how we can cooperate to uphold these very values that we dearly share. And I remain optimistic that we may now begin to move away from the failed patterns of the past to a more promising future that will eventually lead us to where we want to go. A just, peaceful, and sustainable solution to the Palestinian cause. For your companionship, my friends, on this long journey, but worth it. Your solidarity, your support, I offer truly my deepest gratitude, and I promise you that together we will remain steadfast as we move towards securing our common goal of peace and justice. Thank you.